Congressman Hoyer is on his way, so we're going to get started with opening remarks, and he'll slide right in. And welcome to our evening of conversation with Congressman Gephardt and Congressman Steny Hoyer. My name is Stephanie Kurtzman, and I'm honored to serve as director of the Gephardt Institute for Civic and Community Engagement at Washington University in St. Louis. We are proud to serve as the university-wide center to advance civic engagement and civic leadership in the spirit of our namesake and founder, Dick Gephardt. Last week, we hosted a reception for our graduating seniors as they approached commencement. Our speaker was David Dwight, a talented young alumni from biomedical engineering who changed his career trajectory to work for Forward Through Ferguson, the bold nonprofit organization that grew out of the Ferguson uprising. David reminded our graduates that, like him, they will approach decision points in their life when they are called to action, when others are looking to them to lead. When faced with these decision points, he urged our graduates to say yes, to step into the hard work, even if that work is unexpected, unclear, challenging, or contentious. At its core, this is civic engagement. Civic engagement means applying our knowledge, skills, and passions to affect the quality of life in our communities. It means finding a way to act, to say yes, to respond to the challenges that plague families and communities around the world. Civic engagement means working with others through political and non-political processes to generate systemic change. It's listening, dialogue, and collaboration across difference and in a highly divisive climate. Civic engagement calls us to be about something bigger than ourselves and our own ambitions, in the noble pursuit of a world that is more just, equitable, sustainable, peaceful, healthy, and kind. The Gephardt Institute asks Washington University graduates to say yes to civic engagement, to heed the call for civic leadership no matter their major or career. We are making civic engagement part of the fabric of Washington University, seen, felt, and valued throughout our academic schools, across co-curricular life, and through the alumni experience. And we are catalyzing Washington University to fully realize our institutional responsibilities as a citizen of St. Louis, a dedicated partner with our local community to make life better for all. I can imagine no better models of civic engagement than Dick Gephardt, Steny Hoyer, and Joe Madison. On behalf of the Gephardt Institute for Civic and Community Engagement and the Washington University Alumni Association, I thank you for joining us tonight, and I thank our speakers for offering their insights at this precarious time when our nation and world are fraught with challenges and when the need for civic engagement is profound. It is now my pleasure to introduce our student speaker, who will offer remarks and then introduce our speakers and moderator. Madeline Fair is a rising senior majoring in architecture in the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. In the College of Arts and Sciences, she is minoring in urban design and urban studies. Maddie is a Danforth Scholar and a Seiden Family Civic Scholar. As a civic scholar, she participates in the Gephardt Institute's premier civic leadership development program with a selective and diverse cohort of 16 students who exemplify potential for future civic leadership. This two-year program includes intensive coursework, leadership training, immersion trips, and a $5,000 scholarship to support a substantial civic project. Maddie is also captain of the women's club soccer team and a youth tutor with City Faces and the Sam Fox School's Alberti Design Program. She is founder and coordinator of Adopt an Art, an arts outreach program in underfunded elementary schools throughout her hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. Maddie has interned with Mackie Mitchell Architects in St. Louis, and this summer, she will assist Sacramento City Council in the implementation of local affordable housing solutions. Maddie plans to apply her Gephardt Institute training and her interest in the democratization of social spaces to pursue a career in urban design when she graduates next May. Maddie.
Thank you, Stephanie. I am honored to share this space with such innovative leaders and so grateful to be present for this evening's enlightening conversation. In a few short months, I'll begin my fourth and, quite unbelievably, final year as an undergraduate architecture student at Washington University. I've met many of the goals I set for myself freshman year, having checked off my lengthy list of required courses, completed my portfolio to send off to architecture firms, and survived some dreaded long nights in studio. Yet, my younger self would be surprised to know I now consider these accomplishments but small stepping stones along my collegiate path. My greatest learning experiences have arisen not in a lecture hall, but within the community that blossoms outside our campus. St. Louis is not just a place where I go to school. It is a historically rich city filled with dynamic people and vibrant cultures that have expanded my outlook and ideas in ways that academia and the classroom have not. I owe my self-confidence, perspective, compassion, and open-mindedness to the unassuming humility of a sixth grader, worldly insights of a late-night bus driver, and awe-inspiring memoirs of an incumbent alderman. Civic engagement has led me outside WashU's borders and into an understanding of the human condition that I'd never explored before. The Gephardt Institute prepares students to better the lives of people in community by challenging us to hold difficult conversations and pause to consider the other point of view. Where my major has left me questioning why and for whom I am studying architecture, the Gephardt Institute instills purpose and pathways for my passions in design to influence systems change. Where my classes have left me with cold facts and unyielding statistics on the way the world should be run today, the Gephardt Institute has equipped me with the means to chart my own course and reimagine the possibilities for a career that utilizes design to impact lives and incite social opportunity. Through the support of the Civic Scholars Program, I will soon depart for Sacramento to assist city officials in determining the allocation of funds under a new California state bill to create alternative affordable housing solutions. This summer project is quickly approaching, and despite all my planning, I still feel unsure and lost half the time. I question my goals and proposals and whether I'm going to make any real impact as one small outsider in a large, unfamiliar city. But that's where the valuable political and democratizing conversation we hold at the Gephardt Institute comes in. Our dialogue and coursework gives space for everyone's voice to be heard, challenges me to reflect on my assumptions, and has handed me the tools to do something with my passions, to turn my desire to create, to build, and to change into a tangible timeline, and to hone my skills in respecting and advocating for the points of view of people from all backgrounds and walks of life. Even across partisan lines, we can all agree that we have deeply embedded challenges to address in our communities: poverty, violence, disease, and the achievement gap, to name a few. At times, these challenges are so big that we can feel paralyzed, but I don't feel immobilized. Because of the Gephardt Institute, I feel prepared to take these challenges on. I have hope for our nation's future because of the collective passion, commitment, and skill I see across the Washington University community and in this room tonight. Dedicated to addressing the vast and complex challenges of our time, dedicated to improving the quality of life for all, dedicated to strengthening the fabric of our democracy. Thank you. So it is now my privilege to introduce our speakers for the evening. Following my introductions, Congressman Gephardt will offer opening remarks, and then we'll listen in on his conversation with Congressman Hoyer. We will leave time for audience questions following their conversation, which will be facilitated by Joe Madison. Joe Madison is a 1971 graduate of Washington University. He is a groundbreaking radio personality and civil rights activist who has devoted his career to raising awareness about issues around the world. Joe Madison has encouraged dialogue among people of different backgrounds and raised money to support multicultural education and institutions. Known as the Black Eagle, Joe can be heard weekday mornings on Sirius XM's Urban View. Please join me in welcoming Joe Madison. As House Democratic Whip since 2011, Congressman Steny Hoyer is the second-ranking member of the House of Democratic Leadership. He is charged with mobilizing the party vote on important legislation, shaping House Democrats' legislative priorities, and delivering the Democratic message. He previously served as House Majority Leader from 2007 to 2011 and House Democratic Whip from 2003 to 2007. Now in his 18th term in Congress, he also became the longest-serving member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Maryland in history on June 4th, 2007. Please join me in welcoming Steny Hoyer.
If I go out and come back, will you introduce me again?
Sure, of course. Richard Gephardt is President and CEO of Gephardt Government Affairs. He served for 28 years in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1977 to 2005, representing Missouri's 3rd Congressional District, home to his birthplace, St. Louis. He was elected to serve as House Democratic Leader for more than 14 years, as House Majority Leader from 1989 to 1995, and Minority Leader from 1995 to 2003. In his role as leader, Mr. Gephardt emerged as one of the leading strategists of the Democratic Party's platform and chief architect to landmark reforms in healthcare, pensions, education, energy independence, and trade policy. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Dick Gephardt.
Well, thank you so much for that great introduction. Thank you, Stephanie. And Joe, thank you for being here. And Steny, my great friend for so many years, thank you for being here. Give this man a big hand. I'm gonna tell
I'm
more
so
about
glad
him
I
in a
came.
minute.
This is more
You have
applause
to
than I've
wait.
had in a long time.
I got a lot of stories about
Oh,
him.
okay. All right.
Let me thank all of you for being here. This is a very diverse crowd. Some of these folks are Washington U alums. Some are Gephardt alums. And some people just wandered in by mistake and were looking for a nice glass of wine or something. So you're all welcome. However you got here, you're welcome. When I got out of Congress, I knew that I wanted to have an effort in St. Louis at one of our fine universities. We have many. And so I wanted to have not a think tank. We got too many think tanks, plenty of ideas. I wanted an action tank. I wanted an organization that would inspire people of all ages, not just at Washington U, to be citizens. Because my experience, and I know Steny, we shared this experience, and he will say tonight what I've always said, which is a democracy, this great democracy, is dependent upon having good citizens. When Yeltsin was coming into power after Gorbachev, I led a number of delegations to go to Russia, the old Soviet Union. And one of them, I went with Newt Gingrich. We went together to try to help Russia move from what it had been, an old autocracy really, communist, to democracy and to capitalism, which they really wanted to do, the people want. And I always thought the people there are so smart, they're so well educated, they're fabulous people, and this is the major ingredient in any economy in any country. So one day I was in the embassy and I was talking to a young man by the name then of Boris Yavlinsky. He was in the Duma, and And he was with Gorbachev and was one of the real reformers that came up with perestroika and all the ideas that he brought. And so I just said to him, I said, Boris, what's your biggest problem in your view now in Russia? And he thought for a while. I thought he was going to say we don't have any money or our economy's a mess or whatever. Loose nukes. I didn't know what he was going to say. He said, well, we don't have any citizens yet. And it really took me back. I didn't know what he meant. I said, what do you mean? He said, our people have never existed in a democracy. He said, they don't know how to vote. They don't know how to have political parties. They don't know how to support candidates. They don't know how to be candidates. They don't know how to make yard signs. They don't know how to have an agenda, a policy agenda. He said they don't know how to speak to power because they've never done that. I said, well, how are you going to get that? And he said, only through education. He said, there's no other way. And it's going to take time. And that experience, that conversation never left me. And I came back here and I thought, wow, that's our riches. That's our advantage. That's what we have. That's our precious commodity, is we have citizens who are informed, who listen, who consume information, who help, make decisions, who support candidates, who go off to be represented by them to make tough decisions on controversial, difficult issues. And that's why we're a great country. And so when I left Congress, after having seen all the activities that we went through over 28 years, most of it with Steny, I decided I wanted something that would help people understand or re-understand that being a citizen is everybody's obligation, everybody's responsibility. No matter what you do, what role you have in life, you've also got to be a citizen of this great country. And so we set up the Gephardt Institute, and I must tell you, and I've said this to Stephanie and her group many times, this thing is far beyond what I ever imagined it would be. I mean, it is a stunning success. And the people that have gone through this program and done things in the Institute are just the best example of its great, great success. So, with that, we like to have these events around the country and bring folks in, and we're so fortunate to have Steny Hoyer tonight to talk about all of these kinds of issues. One of the things I learned in Congress, and I still believe this, I've always believed this from my experience, is that politics or democracy is a substitute for violence. Don't ever misunderstand it. I mean, we've seen lots of really tough issues decided by the Congress, and we've seen the people on the pro side and the con side. And people are wrought up, they're emotionally involved in these decisions. But because we're a democracy, and our ancestors put 535 people in the room down the street, not one, it means every decision is really hard to arrive at. But the great benefit we get from that is that once we make a big, tough decision through collaboration and listening and thinking together and compromising, my definition of a compromise is that at the end of any compromise, everybody is terribly unhappy. That's the definition of compromise. We're kind of having trouble with that now, but that's always been the definition of it. But the magic in that, and I'm in awe of it still today, and I know he is too, is that once you get that decision, the losers on the issue who are horribly unhappy, don't want to leave the country or pick up a rifle. And that's magic. I love the LBJ movie, and he's trying to pass, I think, the Voting Rights Act. Could have been the Voting Rights Act. And he's on the phone trying to get the votes. And I know Steny knows this feeling well. And he needed, I think, I don't know, 60 votes, whatever he needed. And he's talking to his aide, Walter Jenkins, who had been with him his whole time. And he gets the last vote. I think it was the senator from Nevada, I'm not sure. But anyway, he gets the vote, and he turns to Walter and he says, "Yes! We got it! We got it! I'm in awe of that because it is so damn difficult to get it." Now, we have tonight with us an individual who has had that experience many times. He started in local government in Maryland. He was in state government. He came to the Congress, I think, in 1981 in a special election. And in my humble opinion, in public life in the United States, in history, he is as good as it gets. And I mean it with all my heart. You can go today on the Hill and talk to any member of Congress. You can talk to any member who served with him, and they will all say they like Steny Hoyer. And that's a major achievement. Trust me. I couldn't get there. He can get there. He's fair, he's honest, he has integrity, he's collaborative, he listens, he has empathy with people, he's a compromise creator. And that is a magical talent that we so need in today's world especially. So with that, Steny Hoyer, I'm going to ask you to say a word. Don't say anything about any old stories that you don't want repeated, because I'm sure there's press here today. Everybody's a journalist today. So. Steny Hoyer.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here. I'm sorry that I'm a little late. I spoke at Lois Franklin had convened a group that has some speakers talking about how pay has been historically related to gender. And so I want to talk to them as a father of 3 daughters. I think that's absolutely true, and it's something that we need to deal with in our society. But as Dick was talking, and it behooves me to say, I was for Dick Gephardt for President of the United States at least twice. I would have been with him another time had he run another time. I think Dick Gephardt is one of the finest public servants with whom I've served. And not only did I think Dick would be an excellent chief executive of our country, but I thought and was instructed over time that Dick would have brought extraordinary talent into the administration and the leadership of our country. And Dick, thank you for your service in the House. Dick was our leader for a period of time. And tragically, he never became Speaker because we weren't in the majority. But he would have been an extraordinary Speaker of the House because he understood the institution and he understood what he just talked about, trying to bring people together and create consensus. Anybody, frankly, with half a brain can create confrontation and disunity. It's much more difficult to create unity. And Dick was somebody who did that and did it very, very well. But I was reminded with what President Obama said in his last State of the Union, that he was going to be leaving soon and he would take on the most important title, and Dick's talked about it, and that is citizen. And whatever you think either way, but we have an extraordinary country. And I tell people, Dick, that one of my proudest moments in our democracy was in January of 2001, when I sat on the platform on January 20th, a few feet from President Clinton, a few feet from Vice President Gore, and a few feet from then Governor Bush, and saw the power, the greatest power on earth, transfer without a shot being fired, notwithstanding the fact that Al Gore and many of us believed he won the election. And in effect, he lost a 5-4 vote. Why? Because we perceive ourselves correctly as a nation of laws. And 5 people out of the over 100 million who voted for both sides said, no, this is the outcome. And then Al Gore, to his extraordinary credit, said, I will not contest this further because it would be damaging to our democracy. We're at another time in our history when we've had 65 million people vote for one person and 62 million vote for another, and the 62 million votes carried the day. Because again, we're a nation of laws and we have an electoral college. But we are at risk, in my view, of having citizens appreciate the ability and reality of compromise. I don't know that, Dick, I've seen America more polarized. Now, I went through, as you did, I think I'm a little older than you are, but we went through the civil rights era. And there was a lot of polarization during that era. Desegregation of schools, the opening up of public accommodations, the Voting Rights Act, which you mentioned of 1965. All of that was difficult, tough, angry. People lost their lives. But it seemed to me that it was not as divided a nation as we see today. And as I've, Dick, grown up over the long period of time now, watching our politics, in some ways I think it's because of our media. When I grew up and started to, I was 18, 19, 20, this was the late 50s, early 60s, watching television, essentially you had 3 media outlets, NBC, ABC, CBS. And you had a Frank Reynolds or a Huntley Brinkley or a, who's the, Walter Cronkite. And they saw their jobs as informing the electorate. And so in many ways, the 6:30 hour, 6 hour, 7 hour was a uniting hour because Americans watched these 3 and they got essentially the same thing. The who, what, where, when, and why. If you're a journalist, you know those are the magic words you start your lead with. That's what they got from the journalist, who saw their job as informing. Now, during that hour, we have too many people watching a station that incites them of their prejudice and incites them against people who do not agree with them. And so I think that having forums like this and people who are willing to engage and engage with a premise that the other guy may have a good idea and I ought to listen to it. And I hope that guy listens to me thinking, I have a good idea too. And they may be different, but if we work together, we can harmonize those. Dick talked about our founding fathers. The reason they created, and by the way, they didn't create 535 of us. There were far fewer of us. But the amazing thing about our democracy is, over the years, those members decided to share their power. Because every time they added a state on, their power became less. They may have been 135 at the beginning, then 1, 200th and then 1/300th and 1/400th. Now they're 1/435, or 1 out of 100, where they may have been 1 of 38, or I guess 26. 2 senators per 13 states. So we have seen a growth in that and a willingness to share power. A very important expansion of our democracy. But Dick, thank you for starting this or focusing this. You know, there are 51 Judy centers around our state, which are named for Judy, my wife, who was a teacher. And like yours, they're far beyond what I originally envisioned, and they're doing very, very well. But thank you, because it takes leadership to get something like this started. And if you follow Dick Gephardt's example, you will do very, very well at being a citizen.
Thank you so much, Steny. Let me go back to you on what you said, because I totally agree with you. What I worry most about today is that the information revolution has, through social media and other things, helped create 2 tribes, if you will, where people are in bubbles and they hear information that they agree with and only that, and they begin to actually hate the people in the opposite tribe. Mm-hmm. And I've thought a lot. I know we all think a lot. How do we deal with this? How do we tame this technology so that it works to our benefit rather than our disbenefit? There are no easy answers to it, but in a way we faced this when radio started. I think it wasn't like this, but it was something like this. TV for sure, because you didn't know what information was going to come. We had the fairness doctrine and a lot of things. We tried to regulate that media so that it was more balanced and fair. What I worry about today is that we don't have a common set of facts in front of the people. I mean, I turn on, different channels, and I'm not so much on social media. Incidentally, I read the other day that 60% of the people get most, if not all, of their political information from Facebook. Forget about the channels, the Facebook. And I'm not on that, so I don't know what's going on there. But I watch these different channels, and it is a completely different set of facts. I mean, it's incredible to me. So how do we deal with? I mean, there's a group I read about the other day called Better Angels, and they are structuring conversations in communities, and they have chapters in every state, and they try to get 3 or 4 or 5 people who are far left, people who are far right, whatever, and they try to get them in a conversation, and they start by trying to get them to know one another as human beings. What's their background? Where did they go to school? Blah, blah, blah. And then start talking about, we know we disagree on everything, but are there any values that maybe we come together on? Now, that's a great idea. To me, it's like spitting in the ocean. I mean, how many of these can we do? And you got Facebook out there. Everybody's reading Facebook 24/7. How do you deal with this? Do you all talk about this in Congress?
I think we talk about it. I don't think anybody knows the answer.
Yeah.
You mentioned social media, and one of the problems with social media, I mentioned the 3 networks who had accountability because they were, after all, they were the person who was talking to you on ABC or NBC or CBS, and they were accountable for what they said. The social media is not accountable. First of all, you don't know who's publishing the information that you get. I mean, it's astounding. There are still a significant number of people who believe that Barack Obama was born in Africa. Significant number believe it. No matter how it's been debunked. They believe it because they read it or saw it on their phone or their tablet or their computer. How do you deal with that? Jefferson said, obviously the way to deal with untruths is the truth, spreading the truth. And in my opinion, the major networks still try to do that and do it, but they're being overwhelmed with this avalanche of misinformation that people are getting on a regular basis. We have a president of the United States who has completely gone around the media. You know, he has millions of Twitter followers, and then millions more of us are exposed to his tweets every day because the media is obsessed with covering them. I get that. He's the president of the United States. He says something, it means something. It has consequences. But his views, first of all, change. Secondly, they are not fact-based in many respects, but they are the gospel for a very large numbers of a tribe, as you point out. And to that extent, you know, people have written about it. We're becoming a more tribal. We segregate ourselves in our housing. You know, we talk about redistricting, Dick, and redistricting has had an adverse impact. But even if we reformed redistricting, you think about the neighborhood you live in, we are segregating ourselves by, in effect, what we believe or how we live or what, you know, what we think are important in this country. That's why the Northeast is here, the South is here, you know, some other groups. The West, you know, the Atlantic and the Pacific. We have segregated ourselves in many respects. And that is not good for our society because then we don't learn from one another. It's sort of how we segregated ourselves up here. Because everybody goes home. When you came in 78, 76. You came in 76. Fewer members were traveling back and forth. But and for one reason, the Republicans had a premise, the Democrats are going to be in charge. The Democrats had a premise, the Democrats are going to be in charge. And while some people went home because they thought their districts were at risk, not most. They didn't think they were really at risk. And we thought, until 1994, you know, we must have thought that God had ordained the Democrats be in charge. Now, members go back to their tribes on the weekends. That Thursday night, they get out of here, go back to their tribes, they talk to their tribes tell them this is the right thing to do, and they don't meet with you or me or people from the other side of the aisle, and that's not been a good thing. Well, she's telling us there are 2 minutes left, so I'll shut up.
Well, let me just end with one last quick question. So given what we've just talked about, do you see any advancement within Congress today where members on both sides of the aisle, even in the face of all this tribalism and all the instructions, you know, Jack Kennedy once said about the House, "Here, sir, the people govern." So that's what we're really talking about here, is because the people are in tribes, then the Congress is going to be in tribes. Is there any leadership on, you know, coming forward with young people that are coming to Congress that they want to collaborate, they want to break out of this?
You know, most of the people that come to Congress nowadays as new people come from swing districts. The Republicans go after our moderates, we go after the Republican moderates. It's really perverse. Why? Because they're the districts that the other side has a chance in.
Right.
You know, they don't come after me, they don't come after Nancy. We don't come after Paul Ryan and his district per se, because we become very hardened in the districts and who they're going to vote for. So I think redistricting reform will help. We ought to have that. I don't think it will solve the problem. The media, I think there's just more truth that has to be, and we have to get more credible purveyors of the truth. I think we need leaders who are prepared to work with one another. You were prepared to do that. You were very kind to me and said, you know, people like me. I worked very hard at trying to work across the aisle, to reach out, to get compromise, because I want to see action in the Congress, not just messages. Messages are not enough for the people, but we're doing a lot about messages. And we need to do something about constructive action, not messaging. So I think the answer to your question is, people come up to me and say, when are you guys going to get together? When are you guys going to start working together? My response to them is, as soon as you do. As soon as you start electing people who do not believe that compromise is something that they ought to pursue, as soon as you elect people who don't bring angry vitriol for the other side, but bring a constructive attitude that we're all elected by citizens of this country and they want us to work together. Now, unfortunately, I say that, but that is not necessarily true. When you ask the American people, do you want your person to work with others? Yes, you can go through a long list. Do you want them to compromise their principles? Absolutely not. I want them to stand by their principles. Well, most things in life are not principles, they're pragmatic. Most things we do in life are pragmatic things. We don't think they're liberal or conservative things. They are things that work and make our lives better and can make our country better. And so we need to have those people who are so angry at the Congress for not working together make those who don't work together pay the price.
Amen.
It's just, I could have sat here all evening and listened to the two of you go back and forth. I'm going to start with a question, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. Who has the microphones? Would you please show yourself? There's supposedly two handheld microphones here. Are they here?
Where's Sharon Daniels
Where's
when we
the
need
people
her?
with the microphone? There
Getting
you
it
go.
done.
All right, go get the microphones. There is one rule that I learned from an old town hall talk personality, Phil Donahue. Some of you are too young to know who Phil
Not
Donahue
me.
is. All right, let me tell you the one rule that Phil Donahue taught me. Never give up the microphone. You will watch people grab for it. Never. For those of you that have it, do not give up the microphone.
Some of us are old enough to know that Ronald Reagan learned that lesson in New Hampshire.
That's right. You're absolutely right. But let me ask, as I was listening, I thought about a former congressman that you both worked with, William Clay Sr. Magnificent man from St. Louis. And he wrote a book titled Permanent Interest. And he has this saying that in politics, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interest. Is that true today? And if not, why not?
Well, I hope it's not true that there are no permanent friends. And I hope it's not true that there are no permanent enemies. I mean, there obviously are some people who, it's very difficult for me to believe that they will be my friend at some point in time, or frankly agree with me. But even the most conservative members of the Congress of the United States, my experience has been, from time to time, I agree with them. And when I agree with them, I try to work with them on that issue. So clearly, Bill was right, and I had the great privilege of serving on the Post Office Civil Service Committee with him. There are permanent interests, however, but I think we need to make sure that there aren't permanent enemies, and hopefully there are permanent friends.
What are the permanent interests, Congressman Gephardt?
Well, I think there are some values we all share, no matter how we decide we want to get those values to come alive. They're obvious: freedom, equality, liberty, the bedrock of our country. And I think if you work with people and begin to trust people and respect everybody, you can find answers even on the specifics that amplify those values. The problem we're having now is getting to that conversation, even getting people in the room to spend the time that it takes. You got to start with respect. And I used to say to some members of the caucus, maybe Steny, you remember this, none of us knows everything. I wish I did. I really do, but I don't. I didn't walk in his shoes. I didn't walk in your shoes. I didn't walk in her shoes. I don't know what she knows. I don't know what he knows. I didn't live their life. They may know some things that I just don't know because I'm an imperfect human being. And so I've got to listen. And that gets you to collaboration if you spend enough time at it, and gets you to compromise. And both of us have, all of us in the room have dealt with compromise. I mean, we all compromise in our families. We compromise in all the organizations we're in. We all know what compromise is. But when you're a representative of, so many million people, you've really got to worry about, are you doing a compromise that you can survive with? And part of it is going home and being in front of people and explaining why you made that compromise, because it made a lot of people angry, necessarily. And it's that whole fabric of activity that I think it's hard today because of the media, and not your media.
Thank you.
But because of the social media and the two tribes and the no common set of facts, that it's really hard to get people to be willing to sit in a room and do the hard work. You remember all the big compromises you've been involved in? It's hell, right? I mean, my kids two of my children are here today. They used to ask me, what the heck do you do all day and night? Because I never went home.
All the citizens are still asking that question.
And that leads me to the other thing.
Well, let me tell you what I said.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I said my job is, and it's his job now, is to get a thread through 218 people. And you get almost 218, and then 5 of them drop off, and you got to find another 5 to get up to 218. It's hellacious. It's horrible stuff. And even when you finally get it, it can blow up on you. And you go out to get the vote, but people have to finally vote. And people lie to you. They lie to him, I'm sure, all the time. Yeah, I'm with you. I'll be with you. And then you go out and do the vote, and they're not with you.
Joe,
Yeah.
let me say just a short
Okay.
second. Humility is an important aspect of doing our job. Dick just talked about it. He doesn't know everything. I tell people when they're going to lobby, they need to read a little book, I'm okay, you're okay. It's a little tiny book. It's sort of like everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. And it is, when you go to talk to somebody, you think they're okay. Believe they're okay. They're a good person. And you won't have to tell them, look, I think you're a good person. They will get that immediately. And they will, in return, say, well, I guess he's okay. Because the relationship between two people who don't think the other guy is okay is not going to be a very good one. If you both think you're okay, it will be a much more positive relationship. And what Dick was talking about, you need to have humility that you don't know it all. Because if you think you know it all, listening is not necessary. And the failure to listen is one of the great failings that we see in our society today, where we are all yelling at one another and not listening.
Let me go one more question, and I want to turn it over to the audience, so make sure you raise your hand and we'll get your question to you. You talked in the last part of your comments about leadership. Who are the leaders? Members of Congress, who the average person out here and at home listening when we watch you on TV, when we hear you on radio, you speak as leaders. You present yourself as leaders. Who are the leaders? You, the members of Congress, or the citizens you represent?
The citizens we represent are in charge. They're the bosses ultimately. And very frankly, it works. Now, in some respects, it works too perfectly. That's not leadership. That's followership of the majority opinion that happens to exist at any one moment in time. The leaders may or may not be elected, but they are people who are willing to stand up and say, this is the truth. This is what is in our best interest. Even if you don't think that or like that, we'll talk about it. We'll talk it through. We'll see whether or not we ultimately agree upon it, because that's what democracy is about.
Even if it means not getting reelected?
Even if it means not getting reelected. Let me tell you one of the finest times I've served in the Congress. It was the caucus of the election. It was November of 1994, late 1994. And three women, and Karen English, Karen Shepard, and I'm trying to remember who the third woman was. Dick, remember?
Yeah.
They came into the caucus. We had lost the election. They had all lost their elections. And they came in, and really most members of the caucus had tears in their eyes, and they said, I voted for the economic package, and it was good for the country, and the fact that I lost, do not feel sorry for us. We did the right thing. No, Marjorie voted for it on the floor, but these...
Marjorie.
Yeah, Marjorie.
Ms.
Margolis Mikvinsky. That was leadership. They knew it was the right thing, and in fact, a point of fact, that economic program led to the only 4 years of balanced budgets that any of us have seen in our lifetimes. That's leadership. And if it costs you your job, then it will not cost you your conscience.
Congressman, did you have a comment?
I remember working on this vote very clearly, and one of the features in the package was an increase in the gasoline tax of 3 cents.
Mm.
And I'd have members say to me, I just can't vote for that. And I'd say, why? And they'd say, I mean, the price goes up and down by 3 cents every day just because of normal conditions. Nobody will ever know. And they said, well, my opponent will run ads saying I raised the gasoline tax by 3 cents and I'll lose. And I would say to them, why did you come here? Did you just come here to win this job every 2 years? Or did you come here to do something good for the country? This is a big package. It's got a zillion things in it. We're going to balance the budget. But that's the dilemma that you face in representative government, is you got to hope that people will be willing to sacrifice the job to get something really important done.
Joe, just one point quickly. The kids at Parkland are leaders.
Yes.
They're not elected. They found themselves in a tragic and awful situation, and they decided to act.
So why can't you get legislation on the floor to deal with gun control, since they're leading?
I asked that question today on the floor. We had another moment of silence for those children and teachers that we lost in Texas. And I did a 1 minute, and the gentleman from Texas who represented asked us to come forward, anybody who had lost somebody in school, and there were probably 40, 50 members at the front. I didn't go forward. I lost somebody at Great Mills High School 3 weeks ago. I didn't go forward, and I did in 1 minute. I said, a moment of silence is not enough. It's not adequate. In a democratic body that is lamenting and wringing its hands about this loss of life, we are not doing anything. And the reason being is because too many people are afraid that their constituents do not want them to do something. Democracy works. It takes time, it's slow, but my experience over 50 years now, I was elected to the Maryland State Senate in 1966, and it's been my experience that democracy works. If the citizens want something done, over a time frame, their representatives will do it.
It doesn't move like a speedboat. It
Yeah.
moves quickly, and because
I gotta take 1 minute,
All right, 1 minute.
tell you my gun story. So
a 1 minute story.
Yeah, I'll move fast. I always went door to door for 28 years. That's all I did when I went home. Door to door so I could get by these bad votes because people knew me. So I'm going door to door in '94 after we passed the assault weapon ban. And I was in trouble in the rural part of my district. People were angry. I saw bumper stickers, ban Gephardt, not guns. So I'm going to the store. This guy comes, his shirt's off, big guy. He said, Gephardt, I love you. Your dad was a Teamster. I'm a Teamster. I've always voted for you. You're fabulous. But I can't vote for you this time. I said, why not? He said, I got a letter from the NRA that said, get rid of Gephardt. He wants to take your guns away. I said, the only thing I've ever voted for is the assault weapon ban. And I said, I'm a hunter with my dad. I'd never get rid of the Second Amendment. He said, but I got this letter from the NRA. And I said, well, it's just not true. He said, I'll get the goddamn letter. So he brings the letter out. Sure enough, that's what it says. And I said, look, I got to go to more doors. I can't keep talking. He said, would you let me go with you down the street? So I'd go in a house, come out, and we'd talk about it some more. By the end of the street, I think I got his vote back. You can't do that with everybody. So here's the message. If you want something to happen on guns, whatever it is you want, you have to develop as many single-issue gun control voters as the NRA has produced no gun control voters. And anything else will not mean a thing. I get tired of the discussion because people say we got to do something. That's what you can do. And that's the only thing you can do.
86%.
Because he said it right, democracy works.
86% of the American people thinks we ought to have comprehensive background checks. 86%. What Dick is saying, if those 86% of the people voted against candidates who were not for that, you would see it move rapidly.
All right, I'm going to, I
Shut
love
us
having
up.
control over two congressmen. And so let's get with the questions, if you don't mind. And hold up your hands so that they can see. Let's go up here and work our way back. So please, and remember the rule. Never give up the mic. No, I'm very serious. No, excuse me. Take the mic back. No, really. Now, crawl in right over here. Stand up. And ask him.
Joe has got a lot of experience, you can tell that.
Let me tell you, you'll never get it back. All right, now, please stand up, and this is going to be broadcast on my program on Sirius XM, so tell them who you are, proud graduate of Washington U or whatever, and hold the mic. Do not give him the mic.
Okay. I'm Claude Martins. I am a proud grad of WashU, and I'm also on the National Council of the Gephardt Institute. So I want to thank both of you for doing this fine program. But a quick question for you. The country is obviously very divided politically these days. I was wondering what the Democrats, how much are the Democrats to blame for the situation that elected President Trump, and also what will the Democrats do should they regain the majority in the House?
All right. Who would like to take that first?
Well, I don't think the Democrats are responsible for Donald Trump being elected. That doesn't mean that a number of Democrats did not vote for Donald Trump. What we saw in the last election was a little bit what we saw in Brexit in England and what you're seeing in other parts of the world. There are a lot of people who are hurting. The global economic changes in the world are leaving people behind. And they've got a lot of angst about it, and properly so. And they think the elites are not helping them. When I say the elites, the Hillary Clintons and the George Bushes. Neither Jeb Bush nor Hillary did particularly well, although Hillary won the election. I represent a majority of the people who voted for President of the United States. I don't let my Republican friends forget that. Not to be mean to them, but to have some humility in listening to somebody who represents 65 million people as opposed to somebody who may represent 62 million. Now, obviously, there is no homogeneous view either among the 65 or the 62. My view is in the last presidential election, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were the different sides of the same coin. And if you were to the left, you were for Bernie. If you were to the right, you were for Trump. But you wanted change. You wanted somebody different because the elites had not done what you thought they ought to do. And so our message needs to be that we have performed well, but here's what we're going to do. And you asked me what we would do. I hope the first thing out of the box that we do deals with job creation, retraining so that people are able to work in this new economy that we face. I have an agenda I call Make It in America. I'm spending a lot of time in the Midwest, in particular, talking about making it in America. And retraining and education, entrepreneurship, infrastructure, investment are three of the major points that we make. And I would hope that we would start with that as our agenda item when in November we take back the House, as I believe we're going to do.
Okay. And then there was a question here. Oh, the young lady right here. And we'll work our way back. And this side is taken over. Over here. All right. Gotcha.
That's okay. Hello, my name's Natalie, and I am a graduate of WashU from 2017. And my question is about education. Mr. Gephardt, when you were speaking about the importance of citizenship, you said that the only way to get there is through education. And obviously the Gephardt Institute is a great supplement to education. But our lovely speaker, Maddie, spoke about how her experience in the classroom sort of left her cold and unequipped for citizenship. What do you believe is the role of higher education in the lecture hall, maybe, in creating citizen leaders?
All right.
Well, I'm not an expert, but I think somewhere along the line we've missed out on doing civic education of grade school students and high school students. And if we've missed out at those levels, then we better do it at the college level before people really go out into their adult life. And that's part of what we're trying to do at the Gephardt Institute, but it's got to be an all-nation effort. And I do hope that the high schools, the middle schools, will really reinforce themselves on giving civic education to young people. I certainly had it. I know Steny had it when we were young people.
Yeah.
Joe, can I make a comment on
Yes.
that? One of the things that we need to teach in college, which I'm disappointed that they're too often I'm not seeing, tolerance for others' ideas. We are seeing on college campuses where diversity of ideas ought to be one of the central tenets of the educational experience. We are seeing where either a right-wing speaker or a left-wing speaker, and I speak of wings only because they are more to one philosophical view or the other, are being demonstrated against, not just demonstrated against that I don't agree with you, it is that I don't want to hear you. You can't come on this campus. That is a bad, I think, sign for us because it is showing people who are supposed to be tolerant of one another, who should welcome diversity of thought, are not doing, they may be talking about it, but they're not doing it. And that's one concern I have about our college campuses, that even on the college campuses, we seem to be becoming intolerant of the views of people with whom we disagree.
Yes, I think gentleman right there.
Bruce Levinson, class of 71. I'm holding on to him because I may try to get two questions in. Following up, Congressman Gephardt, on your thoughts, in the state of Maryland, 3 local jurisdictions allow 16-year-olds to vote in local elections. And the District of Columbia has a measure before it now that will be approved later this year that will allow citizens in the district to vote in local elections, 16-year-olds. The idea being to combine that experience with a more robust civic education in high school. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that idea.
Sounds like a great idea, but I have to defer to my friend from Maryland, who maybe has
Well, you're
more
much closer to
experience.
16 than I am. Let me say this, you know, for all of my first vote for president was John Kennedy. I turned 21. You had to be 21. I think any age is an age at which the arbiters of the age decide that people are of sufficient knowledge and experience to cast a vote that is considered by that individual. So whether it's 16, 17, 18, 18, the reason we chose 18, of course, was that was the age to go in the service. And if you could fight, you could vote. And I think that made sense. So if a jurisdiction decides that 16 is the age, at some point in time, it will come to Congress as 16 the age to vote globally for federal offices as well. We'll have to consider that. But I think any age is sort of an arbitrary age at which the lawmakers decide is the age that people can participate effectively. And one of the things that argues for 16 is I think these students have been extraordinary all around the country, not just at Parkland, but all around the country. I see these kids coming up to me and talking to me, and I am astounded by the depth of their understanding, both of the issue and of the system.
I want to second that. I am amazed at the students at Washington U that we see. They are awesome. And they are so much more advanced than when we were young. They really have a depth of understanding. But again, it all goes back to education. They're educated. And that's the key. We got to have that for more.
You know, when you were mentioning about debating on campus, the one image that comes to my mind, and you can still find it on YouTube, is the great debate that James Baldwin had with Buckley. I don't know how many, at Oxford.
William Buckley, yeah.
William Buckley. It was an amazing example of what you talked about, how two men of different political persuasions came together and just debated and argued the facts. It's a great YouTube view for most of you. Yes, sir. And then we'll come over here to this young lady.
First of all, thank you, Congressman Hoyer, for being here along with Congressman Gephardt and the Gephardt Institute.
Gephardt ordered me to be here. So I said, yes, sir.
I worked for Congressman Gephardt on the '86 Tax Act, and Congressman Hoyer, you were my congressman from many, many years ago when serving in the Maryland Senate. My question is, in this month's Atlantic, the cover story is about socioeconomic a way that is a segregational aspect with socioeconomics, and the top 10% seemingly are marrying the top 10%, leaving the bottom 90% in a different format. I'm just kind of curious as to how, from a democracy point of view, a socioeconomic segregational aspect can possibly change.
You know, the top 10% have more wealth than the bottom 90% in the United States, that article you're referring to. Yeah.
Well, Harry's working on that. You just saw an extraordinary wedding. Come on, folks, you know, get with it. Get with what the people are thinking about. I don't think there's any doubt that, you remember I said we're segregating ourselves by residence, but we are segregating ourselves to our detriment economically. And I think the falling of union membership is hurtful in our country. The fact that the productivity has gone up very substantially in the last 15, 20 years and wages have not followed, very harmful. The middle class is being stressed, which is, I think, happened in Brexit, and in some respects, the same thing happened here. Immigrants were being blamed. I think that's not the reason. I think that was placing the blame in the wrong place. But I think it is dangerous for democracy to have this kind of economic segregation where the wealthier keep getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. The worst bill I voted on in the 37 years I've been in Congress was the tax bill we passed late last year, because it will exacerbate 83% of the resources that we are going to borrow from China or somebody to give to the wealthiest in our country. Not, if I asked, raise your hand, who doesn't want to be wealthy in this country, there wouldn't be very many hands raised. We all want to be wealthy, and that's fine. So I don't have any, but once you get to be wealthy, we don't need to give you a better break. And so I think we've exacerbated it by tax policy, and we need to, as I say, retrain vigorously. We have not kept up with the technological displacement that people have experienced in their lives, and they're angry and anxious and very fearful about that. And to the extent that we do not solve this problem, democracy will be at risk.
Can I get?
Let me
yes,
add to that. He's absolutely right, and it really goes to the agenda he described, which is the key to the whole thing. In 1900, 80% of the American people worked in agriculture. Today it's 2%. And then it went to industrial manufacturing, and now it's going to knowledge jobs. Technology and globalization are the culprit. That's what's causing these dislocations. I read the article in Atlantic. If you haven't read it, you ought to read it. It's awesome. And the only answer, you can do some of it. I agree with Steny entirely. Tax policy is one way to cushion that. But ultimately, you've got to have a way that more people can be productive and can earn a decent middle-class living that we grew up in. And it's education, education, training, education. There's no other real answer to this dilemma. And if we don't get on this and do it better than we're doing it, we're in big trouble.
One of the things I always say, excuse me, is that education's the new currency of the 21st century. It's the new currency of the 21st century. Young lady, I think you have the last question. I know you wanted it. Are you okay?
Yes.
No, I'm asking him.
I'm fine. I'm great.
All right.
My name's Grace Randolph. I was proudly rejected from Washington University, but I'm still here.
I love it.
Whatever we might say about it, I think there's certainly an argument that, especially with the 2016 election, there's this sort of new media climate of multiple emotional truths and showmanship politics, and there's an argument to be made that, whatever the morality of that may be, it puts someone into power, and that anyone that there could be taking advantage of that situation with good intent. And Congressman Hoyer, you mentioned both pragmatism and leadership. And I'm curious about trying to find that line when sort of principles and reality come into conflict.
And could you gentlemen then, with answering that question, just wrap up by saying the importance of the Gephardt Institute to young students, if you could, and in this generation, in this class?
I'll do that. You answer it. I'll take care of it.
Okay, you'll take care of the institute.
Yeah.
I have every election cycle, I do an event for the new members of Congress. We do it on usually a Sunday night. They're coming to have the week of orientation. And we do a tour around the Capitol, and then I take them on the House floor, and I'll speak to them about the institution and what it means, the People's House. Every 2 years, the Founding Fathers wanted us to go back to the people and ask them their advice and counsel, or hear what they wanted to say to us. And I close with a quote from Edmund Burke. that I won't do all of the quote. But essentially what Edmund Burke said is that we need to pay very, very close attention to our constituents. We need to listen to them carefully. We need to weigh their arguments very carefully and honestly. And he goes on further than that, but he says, but in the final analysis, what we owe our constituents is our best judgment as to what is best for our country, our state, our municipality. And Lyndon Johnson once said something that I thought was very profound. He said a number of things. He said, it's not so hard to do what is right, but it is hard to know what is right. And by that he meant, you know, not every issue is a simple black and white issue. As a matter of fact, most issues are not black and white. They are pragmatic. What's going to work best for our people, for our country? And so what I think that we all owe one another is our honest judgment, and ultimately vote our honest judgment. And I've found that a number of times I voted when I knew my constituents, the majority of them did not agree with what I had to say, but then I was convinced I could go back to them and tell them why I voted. Ronald Reagan never had the majority of the American people on most of the issues he was for. What he had was a belief by the American people that he was acting in what he thought to be their best interest.
I want to thank Joe and Steny for being here. I really appreciate you coming and being part of this.
Can I say something first?
Sure.
I said Dick ordered me to be here. I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. I lament the fact for my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, that Dick Gephardt did not become president of the United States of America.
Right.
I'm sorry I gave the floor back to you.
Isn't that what we planned?
I'll just wind up by saying I'm more optimistic about the country now than I've ever been.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. I am more optimistic about the country now than I've ever been. I've seen it all. I've participated in it all. And I'll tell you why I am. It's because of you. I have met the American people. He's met the American people. I know how good you are. I really do. I mean this with all my heart. I've been in many, many, many other countries. They don't have, as Yavlinsky said, they don't have what we have. It's you. But we've got to keep you coming. And that's where the Gephardt Institute has a small little role. And I appreciate you being here tonight. If you want to get involved more in the Gephardt Institute, we'd love to have your involvement. Everybody has to do what they can do. And that's one of the things that you can do at Washington University, which is a fabulous institution in our country. So thank you all for
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
Have a few quick thank yous and we'll get to conversation. Please join me in another round of applause for Dick Gephardt, Steny Hoyer, and our own Joe Madison. Also like to recognize a number of colleagues and friends who've been indispensable in bringing this special event to life. Sharon Daniels, Greg Carnrick, Bill Frymoyer, Tammy Cavaretta, Suzanne Wagstaff, Jen Thomas, Teresa Quo, and our student speaker, Maddie Fair. I'd like to extend our thanks to our host, the founder and CEO of District Winery, WashU alumni Brian Leventhal. And with that, please stay and enjoy District Winery. We have food, drink, and conversation waiting. Thanks so much for coming.